Sometimes when you find yourself going through a difficult situation, there are no quick fixes. In fact, there will be times when the only way we'll be able to keep it together and make it through is by holding on to our faith in the Lord. What does faith do? David says faith will help us to see God's goodness. David says, unless I believed that I would see the goodness of the Lord, I never would have made it. Well, how do you see the goodness of the Lord? Well, to see here means to experience. David said, my faith told me, in spite of everything that my enemies had planned for me, in verse 12. God had greater plans for me in verses 13 and 14. There's a man in the book of Genesis named Joseph who found out that same truth. In Genesis chapter 37, Joseph had a dream that he would one day be in a position of authority over his brothers. He made the mistake of sharing this dream with them, and when he did, they were determined that it would never come to pass, that he would never rule over them, and they sold him into slavery, and they thought that would be the end of their brother and the end of the story. But when God has a plan for you, and when God has a plan for your life, there is no devil in hell that can keep God's plan from coming to pass. Joseph eventually became the second most powerful man in Egypt. He was reunited with the same brothers that sold him into slavery. And yes, they did have to bow just like he dreamed they would. And Joseph could have tried to get revenge on them. He could have sold them off, or had them thrown in a pit somewhere. But that's not what he did. After it was all said and done, he was able to say to them, "You did what you did for evil, but God meant it for good." Joseph understood something that the Apostle Paul would later share with the church at Rome, and that is that all things work together for good for those who love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. Faith says God is good, and faith helps you see the goodness of God in spite of everything that may be going wrong in your life. When you're immature, you only think God is good when God blesses you with material things. But when you've walked a while with God, you can say that God is good when you have material things or not. Faith helps you to see God's goodness, but faith will also help you survive your situation. David says, I almost gave up, I almost fainted, but my faith helped me to believe that I was going to see the goodness of the Lord. Where? Where are you going to see it, David? Where are you going to see the goodness of the Lord? In the land of the living. In other words, my enemies in verse 12 had planned to wipe me out. But you know what? In spite of their plans, I'm going to make it. I'm going to survive everything that they try to do to me. And get this, I'm not going to survive it in the sweet by and by. I'm going to survive their plans in the here and now. And that's what faith does. Faith gives you the assurance, the blessed assurance that no matter how things look around you right now, no matter how much you feel like throwing up your hands and throwing in the towel, you won't give up. You won't bow down. You won't throw in the towel because you know that you'll make it. So instead of focusing on his dark situation, David focuses on the Lord. Instead of placing faith in himself and his own abilities, he places his faith in the Lord. And then the last thing David does is he encourages himself to persevere. In verse 14, he says, "Wait on the Lord and be of good courage, and he shall strengthen your heart." Wait, I say, on the Lord. David says, wait. The word wait means to look for, to hope for, to wait in faith. He says, wait, and be of good courage, and be strong. But here's the question. Who's David talking to? Who is he challenging to do this? He is talking to himself. His stronger self is encouraging his weaker self not to get depressed and not to fall into a state of despair, but to wait on God. There are times when we do have doubts, and there are times when we wonder, am I really going to make it through? Am I really coming out of this? Will I really get healed? Will my situation really turn around? David had a stronger self and a weaker self, a believing self and a doubting self. And he wasn't alone. In Mark chapter 9, a man brought his demon-possessed son to Jesus. And when Jesus asked him, "Do you believe that I have the power to heal your son?" the man said, "Lord, I do believe." I want to suggest to you that was his stronger self talking. But then his weaker self spoke up and said, "Help my unbelief." He said, "When I look at you, I believe. But when I look at the problem, sometimes I wonder." Have you ever been there? Trapped between I do, but I don't. I can, but I can't. And in times of despair, this is how we'll be able to make it through. It depends on 3 letters, and here are the letters. WHO. That spells who. But if I take the same 3 letters and rearrange them, I can get HOW, which spells how. when you are really experiencing trials, or when you are really under attack in some area of your life, your stronger self is always concerned with WHO, but your weaker self is always asking HOW, how? How in the world am I going to get through? He said, listen, your problem is that you keep wondering how, but instead of how, you should be focusing on who. His stronger self said, wait on the Lord and be of good courage, and he shall strengthen your heart. This is not a suggestion. This is a commandment. His stronger self commands his weaker self to wait on God, and he tells him, oh, and one more thing, be strong, friend. The problem with some of us is we keep listening to our weaker self. Our weaker self keeps sounding like a broken record. Our weaker self keeps asking the question, how? How am I going to make it? How am I going to get through this? How am I going to make ends meet? How am I going to get up off my sick bed? But we need to listen to our stronger self. Because when our weaker self keeps asking the question, how, our stronger self will respond with the word who. In the book of Genesis, the Bible records the exploits of a man named Abraham. And in the 22nd chapter, it tells us how Abraham was tested by God. God told him, Abraham, take your only son Isaac and get thee into the land of Moriah and offer the boy as a burnt offering. Abraham got up early the next morning, took a couple of his servants, the wood for the offering, and his son Isaac, just like the Lord told him to, and headed out. And after a 3-day journey, they arrived at the place where God wanted him to offer the sacrifice. Abraham turned to his servants and said, you all stay here with the mules until I come back. He took the fire and the knife and made Isaac carry the wood. And at that point, Isaac realized that there was something wrong with this picture. He said, Father, I see the fire for the offering, and I have the wood. But where is the lamb for the offering? And Abraham just turned to him and said, my son, God will provide a lamb for the offering. And when they made it to the spot that God wanted him to build the altar on, Abraham built the altar, laid the wood in order, and bound Isaac, his son, to the altar. And as Abraham stretched forth his hand to offer his son as a sacrifice, the angel of the Lord called unto him out of heaven and said, Abraham, lay not your hand on the boy. Because you were willing to sacrifice your only son, I know that you fear God. And the text tells us that Abraham looked up and there was a ram caught in a bush. Abraham sacrificed the ram that day, and he named the place of the sacrifice Jehovah Jireh, which means the Lord will provide. And I bring this story to your attention for a reason. When Abraham set out to offer Isaac up as a sacrifice, he didn't know how things were going to work out. He didn't know how things would turn out, but he did know who would provide and who would make a way out. And that's my message for you. Friend, listen. I don't know how your problem will be solved. I don't know how things will turn around for you. I don't know how the broken places in your life will be fixed. But I do know who has the power to fix what's broken in your life. When you are in need, he'll be your Jehovah Jireh, the Lord who will provide. When you are sick, he'll be Jehovah Roph, the God who heals. When you find yourself in a struggle, he'll be your Jehovah Nissi, God on the battlefield. Friend, we serve a God who will never leave us. We serve a God who will never forsake us. We serve a God who will walk with us and talk with us and never leave us alone. So when the trials come, we to believe that by faith we're going to make it. And we're going to make it because the Lord is our light and our salvation. We're going to make it because the Lord is the strength of our life. Of whom shall I be afraid? We're going to make it because we believe, and we're standing on Psalm 27. Let me read it to you one more time. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? When the wicked came against me to eat up my flesh, my enemies and foes, they stumbled and fell. Though an army may encamp against me, my heart shall not fear. Though war may rise against me, in this I will be confident. One thing I have desired of the Lord, that will I seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of the Lord, and to inquire in his temple. For in the time of trouble he shall hide me in his pavilion. When you said, seek my face, my heart said to you, your face, Lord, I will seek. Do not hide your face from me. Do not turn your servant away in anger. You have been my help. Do not leave me nor forsake me, O God of my salvation. When my father and my mother forsake me, then the Lord will take care of me. Teach me your way. In the secret place of his tabernacle, he shall hide me. He shall set me high upon a rock. And now my head shall be lifted up above my enemies all around me. Therefore, I will offer sacrifices of joy in his tabernacle. I will sing, yes, I will sing praises to the Lord. Hear, O Lord, when I cry with my voice. Have mercy also upon me and answer me, O Lord, and lead me in a smooth path because of my enemies. Do not deliver me to the will of my adversaries. For false witnesses have risen against me, and such as breathe out violence. I would have lost heart unless I had believed that I would see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Wait on the Lord. Be of good courage, and he shall strengthen your heart. Wait, I say, on the Lord.